In the quiet stretches of space, far from the busy civilizations of the galaxy, there was a planet that had been forgotten by time. Its name, lost to history, was once known as the home of the Alvins, a proud and powerful alien race. But now, their world was nothing more than a barren wasteland. The cities that once sparkled with life were now broken ruins. Their advanced technology, once the envy of the universe, had long since decayed. And the Alvins themselves, they were on the edge of extinction, their numbers dwindling with each passing year. The planet was dying. But deep beneath the surface, in the heart of the ancient capital, something stirred. For centuries, the Alvins had been silent, their voice lost in the vastness of space. Yet now, for reasons unknown, a signal was sent into the stars. A distress call, faint but clear. It was a call for help, one that had been buried for millennia, waiting for the right moment to break free. The signal echoed into the void, hoping someone, anyone, would hear it. On Earth, far across the galaxy, the message was intercepted by the newly formed Galactic Council. It wasn't unusual for lost signals to be picked up by Earth's advanced listening stations, but this one stood out. It was unlike anything they had ever heard before. The message was old, filled with static and broken words, but its meaning was unmistakable. Someone needed help. Captain Rhea Brooks, a skilled leader of Earth's space exploration teams, sat in the control room of the Nebula Dawn, a sleek and advanced starship. She had seen many strange things in her time as a captain, but nothing like this. The message was not from an enemy or a new alien species. It came from a race that Earth had never even heard of, the Alvins. "Are we sure about this?" Rhea asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. She turned to her first officer, Lieutenant Eric Duran, who was reviewing the data on his screen. "We double-checked the source," Eric replied. "It's coming from an uncharted star system, far from any known colonies or trade routes. The Alvins, as far as we can tell, are not listed in any galactic records." Rhea stood up and walked over to the large holographic map that filled the center of the room. She studied the glowing stars and the dark, empty spaces between them. Her finger traced the path to the signal source. "This is a long way out. Are we certain it's not a trap?" Eric hesitated for a moment before replying. "There's no evidence of hostile activity. It looks like a genuine distress signal, Captain." Rhea folded her arms, her mind racing. A distress signal from a lost alien race. This was more than just a mission. It could be the discovery of a lifetime. Yet there was something that unsettled her. Why had no one heard from the Alvins before? Why had they disappeared? "Prepare the Nebula Dawn for immediate launch," she said, her voice resolute. "We're going to investigate." The crew worked swiftly, and within hours, the starship was ready to embark on its journey. As Rhea and her team made their final preparations, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mixed with unease. She had led many missions into the unknown, but this one felt different. There was something about the Alvins, something about their silence, that made her wonder if they were truly alone in their struggle, or if there was more to this story than met the eye. The journey to the Alvins' forgotten homeworld was long and treacherous. As the Nebula Dawn cut through the blackness of space, Rhea sat in her captain's chair, staring out at the stars. Her crew moved around her, each focused on their tasks, but the silence in the room was heavy. They were heading into the unknown, to a place where no one had ventured in centuries. When they finally arrived in the Alvins' star system, the planet was barely visible through the thick clouds of dust and debris that surrounded it. The once beautiful world was now a shadow of its former self. Rhea couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and sadness. It was a world that had known greatness, but now it was dying. Yet somewhere on that world, the last of the Alvins still survived, and it was her job to find them. "Commence the scan," Rhea ordered. The ship's advanced scanners sent out pulses, searching for any signs of life. The results were grim. There were no signs of large cities or populations, but then a faint reading appeared. It was a small energy source buried deep underground. "Captain, we found something," Eric said, his voice tense. Rhea's heart raced. "Is it a colony?" "It's hard to say. But whatever it is, it's important." Rhea gave a sharp nod. "Prepare the landing team. We're going down there." As the crew prepared to land, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The Ulvans were in desperate need of help, and humanity was about to become their only hope. But what other secrets did this forgotten race hold? And what dangers awaited them on their dying world? The nebula Dawn descended into the dust clouds, its engines cutting through the thick atmosphere. Rhea stared ahead, ready to uncover the mysteries of the forgotten alien race. She didn't know it yet, but this journey would change everything. The nebula Dawn descended through the clouds of dust and debris that surrounded the forgotten world. As the ship made its way toward the surface, the crew could feel the weight of the planet's silence pressing in around them. It was a silence that had lasted for centuries, a silence that spoke of lost history, forgotten voices, and a dying civilization. Rhea Brooks stood at the front of the ship's bridge, her eyes fixed on the planet below. She had been on many missions, but this one felt different. There was something about the Ulvan's distress call that tugged at her heart. It wasn't just a call for help. It was a plea for salvation. "Captain, we're entering the atmosphere," Lieutenant Eric Duran said from behind her, his voice steady, but with a hint of uncertainty. "The turbulence is strong, but we should be able to land in one piece." Rhea nodded. "Good. Keep an eye on the readings. I don't want any surprises." The ship shook as it passed through the thick layers of the planet's atmosphere. Outside, the sky was a swirling mix of orange and gray, and the once beautiful surface of the planet below was barely visible through the haze. The land appeared barren, cracked, and scarred, with no signs of life. Nothing but the ruins of a civilization long gone. When the ship finally touched down, the crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had arrived. Rhea gathered her team for the mission. "Stay alert," she told them. "This is an unknown world, and we don't know what we'll find down there." As they suited up and prepared to leave the ship, Rhea's thoughts wandered to the Ulvans. Who were they? What had happened to them? And why had they disappeared from the galaxy's records? The questions seemed endless, and yet she couldn't help but feel that they were about to uncover something extraordinary. The crew stepped out of the ship and onto the planet's surface. The ground beneath their feet was dry and cracked, the air thin and harsh. The landscape was a wasteland, with the remains of grand cities barely visible in the distance, their once proud structures now reduced to rubble. It was a sight that filled Rhea with both awe and sadness. How had such a powerful race fallen so far? "Let's move out," Rhea ordered, her voice cutting through the stillness. "Eric, you and I will lead. The rest of you stay in formation and watch your surroundings." The team moved cautiously across the barren landscape, their boots crunching on the dry earth. As they neared the ruins of what was once a grand city, they could see the remnants of towering buildings, now nothing more than broken stone and twisted metal. But there was something else, something that caught Rhea's attention. In the center of the ruins stood a large structure, its design unlike anything she had ever seen before. "It's a temple," Eric said, his voice filled with awe. "But it doesn't look like anything from our galaxy." Rhea nodded, her eyes scanning the structure. It was massive, with strange symbols etched into its surface, glowing faintly in the dim light. It seemed out of place, as if it didn't belong here at all. Yet there was no denying the sense of power it radiated. "We need to check it out," Rhea said, her curiosity growing. "Stay sharp. There's no telling what we'll find inside." As they entered the temple, the atmosphere shifted. The air inside was cool and thick with the scent of ancient stone. The walls were lined with carvings, depicting scenes of the Ulvan's past, grand battles, peaceful times, and their rise to power. But there was a shadow in the carvings, a darkness that seemed to follow their every step. Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The group moved deeper into the temple, their footsteps echoing in the quiet. As they reached the center of the structure, they found a large, circular chamber. At the center of the room was a pedestal, on which rested an old device. It was unlike anything Rhea had ever seen, shaped like a crystal, glowing with a faint light. "Is that what we've been looking for?" Eric asked, his voice filled with wonder. Rhea stepped forward, her hand hovering over the device. "This might be it. It could be some kind of power source, or maybe even a message." As she reached out to touch the crystal, the device suddenly hummed to life. The room around them seemed to tremble, and the air grew colder. A voice, soft but clear, spoke from the crystal. "Help me, please." Rhea froze. The voice was faint, almost as if it were a whisper carried from the past. She couldn't tell if it was an echo or a live transmission. But one thing was certain. Someone, or something, was trying to reach them. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric nodded, his face pale. "I heard it." Rhea took a deep breath. "We need to figure out who's speaking to us. This is more than just a distress signal. Someone, or something, is still alive on this planet." As the crew stood in the chamber, the faint glow from the crystal illuminated their faces. The silence of the planet, once so overwhelming, was now filled with a sense of anticipation. They had found something, someone who had been waiting for centuries. And now, they were their only hope. The crystal hummed with energy, its light growing brighter as the voice echoed through the temple. Rhea Brooks stood motionless, her hand still hovering above the strange device. The voice was soft and filled with desperation, as though it had traveled through time to reach them. "Help me, please." Rhea exchanged a quick glance with Lieutenant Eric Duran, who was standing a few paces away. His eyes were wide, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. "Did you hear that, Captain?" Eric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard it," Rhea replied, her voice calm but laced with urgency. She looked back at the crystal. This is no ordinary artifact. Someone is trying to communicate with us." The rest of the crew, who had been carefully observing the room, stepped closer. They, too, could hear the faint, trembling voice. It was clear that whatever was happening, it was important. Rhea knelt beside the pedestal, her fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. The energy seemed to pulse under her touch as though it was alive. The voice spoke again, this time louder, more distinct. "Please, help the Ulvans. We are dying. The last of us. We cannot survive without you." A chill ran down Rhea's spine. She felt the weight of the words sink into her chest. The Ulvans weren't just a forgotten race. They were on the brink of extinction, and they were asking for help. But why had they waited so long? And what could humanity possibly do for them? "Captain," Eric said, his voice filled with urgency. "What do we do now?" Rhea's mind raced as she tried to piece everything together. They had come here hoping to uncover the secrets of the Ulvans, but now it seemed the situation was far more dire than they had imagined. The Ulvans were not just an ancient lost civilization. They were a people in desperate need of salvation. She turned to Eric. "We need to find out where this signal is coming from. It's clear that someone is still alive, and they're asking for help." Eric nodded. "I'll gather a team to search the surrounding area. Maybe we can locate the source of the message." Rhea stood up, her gaze still fixed on the glowing crystal. "Make it quick. Whatever we're dealing with here, it's not just an ordinary distress call." As Eric and the crew began to move out of the chamber to search the temple, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something far bigger than they had anticipated. This was no simple rescue mission. It was a chance to uncover the fate of an entire race. Minutes later, Eric returned, his face grim. "Captain, you need to see this." Rhea followed him down the long, dark corridors of the temple, her heart pounding. The walls of the structure were lined with carvings, ancient images of the Ulvans' glory days. But as they moved deeper into the heart of the temple, the carvings changed. The peaceful scenes of flourishing cities and happy families turned into images of war and destruction. The last carvings depicted a group of Olvins, huddled together, looking up at a dark sky filled with ships, their faces filled with fear and uncertainty. "This is it," Eric said, pointing to a final carving on the wall. It showed a massive structure hidden deep underground, its entrance guarded by the last remnants of the Olvin army. The image was old, its lines faded, but it was clear. This was the place. "That's where we need to go," Rhea said, her voice firm. "It looks like the Olvins tried to protect something, maybe the key to their survival." The crew gathered their equipment and prepared to venture further into the temple. The air was thick with the weight of history, and the walls seemed to close in around them as they descended into the depths. After what felt like hours of navigating dark, winding passages, they finally reached the entrance depicted in the carving. The door was large and imposing, made of a material that shimmered faintly in the low light. As Rhea approached, she could feel a strange energy emanating from it. "This must be it," Rhea said, her voice filled with anticipation. "Get ready. We don't know what's waiting for us inside." Eric stepped forward, scanning the door with a handheld device. "The door's locked, but I can override it." He worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls, and within moments, the massive door began to slide open with a low rumble. A wave of cool air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of age-old dust and the faintest trace of something else, something metallic. Inside, the team found themselves in a large underground chamber, the walls lined with advanced technology. It was a stark contrast to the crumbling ruins of the planet's surface. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, an enormous machine, its purpose unclear. Is this a weapon?" Eric asked, his voice filled with awe. Rhea's eyes scanned the machine, her mind working fast. "No, this is something else. This is what the Olvins were protecting. Whatever it is, it holds the answer to their survival." As Rhea and her team moved closer to the machine, the crystal that had guided them began to glow once more. The voice returned, stronger now, as if it were finally able to speak freely. "Thank you. Thank you for coming. The last of the Olvins is here. You are our salvation." Rhea felt a chill pass through her. The Olvins had been waiting for them. And now, it seemed they were about to uncover the true purpose of this ancient machine, and the fate of an entire race. The underground chamber was eerily quiet as Rhea and her team stood before the massive machine. The faint hum of energy seemed to pulse through the air, vibrating in the very bones of the structure. The crystal had stopped glowing for now, but the voice that had guided them was still fresh in their minds. "Thank you. Thank you for coming. The last of the Olvins is here. You are our salvation." Rhea's heart raced. The voice had spoken to them with such sincerity, with such a sense of desperation. She glanced at Eric, who was standing beside her, his face lit by the soft glow of the machine. "Salvation," Eric murmured. "What does that mean, Captain?" Rhea frowned, deep in thought. "I don't know, but we're about to find out. The Olvins have been waiting for someone to unlock whatever this machine holds. We need to understand its purpose. Fast." The machine in front of them was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a massive metallic structure with intricate patterns running across its surface. The patterns seemed almost alive, shifting and changing as if responding to their presence. At the center of the machine was a large spherical core that glowed faintly, almost as if it were breathing. "Let's start by scanning it," Rhea said, her voice steady. "We need to gather as much information as we can." Eric nodded and activated his scanning device. A soft beep filled the air as the machine's data began to appear on his screen. He frowned as he studied the readings. "This is strange," Eric said, his brow furrowing. "It's as if the machine is alive. The energy levels are fluctuating in ways I've never seen before." Rhea stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the glowing core. "It's not just a machine," she said quietly. It's a power source, a living power source. It must be connected to the Ulvin's survival in some way. The team gathered around as Eric continued to scan the machine. The readings on his device were growing more complex by the second, each one more confusing than the last. The structure was ancient, but its technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "We need to open it," Rhea said, her voice firm. "If this is the key to the Ulvin's survival, we have to know how it works." Eric hesitated, glancing at the others. "Are you sure? This thing could be dangerous. We don't fully understand what we're dealing with here." Rhea met his gaze. "We don't have a choice. The Ulvins asked for our help. If we don't do something, they might be lost forever." The rest of the crew nodded in agreement. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Rhea stepped forward and placed her hand on the surface of the machine. The moment her skin made contact, a jolt of energy surged through her, causing her to stumble back in shock. The machine seemed to respond, its patterns shifting rapidly as if it were waking up from a long slumber. "Are you okay, Captain?" Eric asked, his voice filled with concern. Rhea took a moment to steady herself, her heart pounding. "I'm fine. It's more powerful than I expected." She glanced back at the machine, the energy emanating from it now almost overwhelming. "There has to be a way to open it. There must be some sort of control." Eric's eyes scanned the machine again, his device flashing with new readings. "Wait, there's something here. A hidden panel." He stepped forward and pressed a sequence of symbols on the side of the machine. The panel slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small glowing orb. The orb seemed to pulse with a steady rhythm, and as it did, the voice returned, clear and calm. "Thank you," it said. "You have unlocked the path to our survival." Rhea's breath caught in her throat. The orb was the key to unlocking the Ulvin's fate. She stepped forward slowly, her hand outstretched toward it. Before she could touch the orb, the ground beneath them suddenly trembled. The entire chamber shook, and the walls seemed to vibrate with an unseen force. The hum of the machine grew louder, and the glowing core in the center of the structure brightened until it was almost blinding. "What's happening?" one of the crew members shouted, looking around in alarm. Rhea's eyes were fixed on the orb. "It's activating," she said, her voice filled with both awe and fear. "The machine is coming to life." The shaking intensified, and the walls began to crack. Dust and debris rained down from above as the entire chamber seemed to come alive with energy. Rhea stepped back, her instincts telling her to be cautious, but the pull of the machine was too strong. "We need to get out of here," Eric shouted. "This place is collapsing." But Rhea couldn't move. Her eyes were locked on the orb. And in that moment, she felt a strange connection to it, as if it were speaking directly to her. The voice of the Ulvins was now clearer than ever. "You have awoken the heart of the Ulvin people," it said. "It is now in your hands." Rhea reached out, her fingers trembling as she finally touched the orb. The moment her skin made contact, the chamber fell silent. Everything around them stopped. The shaking ceased. The walls stopped vibrating. The machine's hum faded to nothing. For a long moment, Rhea stood still, holding the orb. The entire crew watched, breathless, as the silence stretched on. Then slowly the orb began to glow brighter, and the voice spoke one last time. "You are our savior." The orb in Rhea's hands hummed softly, its light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The chamber around them was still, but there was a sense of change in the air, as if the entire world was holding its breath. The voice of the Ulvins had faded, leaving only the quiet sound of the energy flowing through the machine. For a moment, no one spoke. The crew stood in awe, unsure of what to do next. Rhea's fingers tightened around the orb, and she could feel the weight of its power, the responsibility it carried. This wasn't just a machine. It was a key to unlocking the secrets of the Ulvins and their forgotten history. "What now?" Eric asked quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was filled with uncertainty. What do we do with this thing? Rhea turned to him, her expression serious. We need to understand it. We've woken something up, and I think it's time to learn what that something is. She stepped forward cautiously, the orb still glowing softly in her hands. The moment she moved, the chamber around them seemed to respond, as if the walls themselves were alive. The air grew warmer, and the faint hum of the machine began again, this time louder and more intense. Rhea held her breath, waiting for something to happen. The orb seemed to be guiding her, its glow growing stronger with each step she took toward the center of the room. As she approached the large spherical core of the machine, the patterns on the walls began to shift once again, swirling and changing like liquid light. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse, as if the entire room was alive, reacting to her presence. "Captain," Eric said, his voice tense, "are you sure this is safe?" Rhea didn't respond immediately. She was too focused on the orb and the machine before her. Her instincts told her that this was the moment they had all been waiting for. The Ulvins' fate, and perhaps the fate of their entire species, was in her hands. She stalked in front of the core, raising the orb toward it. The light from the orb intensified, illuminating the chamber in a brilliant glow. For a moment, everything was bathed in white light. Rhea's heart raced in her chest, and she felt a connection to the machine, as if it were calling to her. Then, with a soft click, the core of the machine opened, revealing a hidden compartment within. Inside the compartment was a small, intricately carved stone tablet, covered in strange symbols. Rhea's breath caught in her throat as she gently placed the orb beside the tablet. The moment the two touched, the symbols on the tablet began to glow, and a holographic projection flickered to life in front of them. The projection showed an image of a planet, vast and green, its oceans sparkling in the sunlight. It was a beautiful world, but it was also strange, alien yet familiar. The projection zoomed in on the surface, revealing a city, ancient and towering, its structures unlike anything Rhea had ever seen. "This is it," Rhea whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is the Ulvins' homeworld." The image flickered, showing images of the Ulvins themselves. They were a peaceful people, tall and graceful, their skin shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The images showed their cities, their culture, and their way of life, but they also showed something darker, an enemy, a force that had come from beyond the stars to destroy them. "They were wiped out," Eric said softly, his voice filled with sadness. "Their entire civilization was destroyed." Rhea nodded, her gaze never leaving the projection. "But not all of them. The machine, it's a remnant of their technology. It's kept them alive, kept their memory intact." The image shifted again, showing a group of Ulvins standing before the machine. They were performing a ritual, their hands raised toward the sky, as they chanted in a language Rhea couldn't understand. The ritual seemed to be a plea, a call for help. Rhea's heart skipped a beat as she realized the truth. The Ulvins weren't just waiting for someone to find their machine. They were waiting for a savior from another world. Eric's eyes widened in understanding. "You mean, us? We're the ones they've been waiting for." Rhea looked at him, her mind racing. Yes, the Ulvins knew they couldn't survive on their own. They needed help, and they've left us a way to save them. The holographic projection shifted once more, showing the Ulvins preparing to leave their world behind, their last hope resting in the hands of those who would come after them. "We have to go to their planet," Rhea said, her voice resolute. "We have to find the Ulvins' last survivors and bring them back to life." The team exchanged uncertain glances, but Rhea's determination was clear. She was ready to see this through. She had no idea what dangers they would face, what obstacles lay ahead. But one thing was certain: humanity's future was tied to the Ulvins' survival. If they failed, the entire species would vanish into the annals of forgotten history. Eric stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We're with you, Captain. Whatever it takes." Rhea nodded, grateful for the support of her crew. Together, they would face whatever challenges awaited them on the distant world of the Olvans. And as they turned to leave the chamber, the orb still glowing softly in Rhea's hands, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The path ahead was unknown, but she knew one thing for certain. Humanity had been given a chance to save an ancient race, and they would not let that chance slip away. The vast expanse of space stretched before them, an endless sea of stars. The crew stood in the command center of the ship, their eyes fixed on the holographic map that displayed their destination. A small distant planet, home to the Olvans, an ancient civilization that had once thrived, now lost to time. Rhea stood at the front of the room, her gaze unwavering. The mission was clear: find the Olvans, learn what had happened to them, and help them reclaim their place in the galaxy. The weight of their task was heavy, but she knew they had no choice. The galaxy needed the Olvans, and they were the only ones who could help. "Captain, the coordinates are set," Eric said, his voice steady as he glanced up from the navigation console. "We'll be arriving in 3 hours." Rhea nodded. "Good. Prepare the team. We'll need to be ready for anything." The crew scattered, gathering their gear and finalizing their plans. They had no idea what they would find on the Olvans' homeworld. The planet was distant, its location hidden for centuries, and even the most advanced scanners hadn't been able to pinpoint its exact coordinates until the orb had activated the hidden map. The crew had seen images of the Olvans through the holographic projections, tall, elegant beings with shimmering skin and a peaceful nature. But they had also seen the darkness that had destroyed them. The enemy that had wiped out their civilization was still out there, somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the hours ticked by, the ship drew closer to its destination. The crew members were on edge, each lost in their thoughts, wondering what awaited them. The unknown had a way of making even the bravest hearts race with uncertainty. Eric approached Rhea as she stood by the large viewport, gazing out at the stars. "Captain, are you sure we're ready for this?" Rhea turned to him, a determined look in her eyes. "We don't have a choice. If we don't help them, if we don't find out what happened, we may lose them forever." Eric nodded, but there was still doubt in his eyes. "I just don't want to lose you, Rhea. We're walking into a situation we don't fully understand." Rhea smiled softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know, Eric, but we've faced worse before. And we have each other. That's what matters." The ship shuddered as they entered the atmosphere of the distant planet. The deep green surface below them was a stark contrast to the cold, empty void of space. As the ship descended, they could see the remnants of ancient cities, their towering spires now crumbling under the weight of time. "Captain, we've entered the atmosphere," reported Jace, the ship's communications officer. "I'm picking up faint signals. It's not much, but it's something." "Keep monitoring it," Rhea ordered. "We need to find out who or what is still on the planet." The ship touched down gently on the surface, the engines humming softly as they powered down. The crew gathered their gear, their boots hitting the cold, dusty ground with a faint echo. The air was thick with the scent of ancient vegetation, and the wind carried the weight of forgotten history. As they stepped off the ship, Rhea felt a strange sense of déjà vu. It was as though the planet itself was calling to her, urging her to find the answers hidden beneath its surface. "We need to find shelter," Eric suggested. "It's getting dark, and we don't know what we're dealing with out here." Rhea agreed, her gaze scanning the horizon. In the distance, a ruined city loomed, its towering structures crumbling under the passage of time. "That's our best bet," she said. "Let's move out." The team made their way toward the city, the ruins growing larger with each step. The air felt heavy with silence, and there was an eerie stillness to the environment, as if the planet itself had been abandoned for centuries. As they reached the outskirts of the city, Rhea noticed something strange. In the distance, a flicker of movement caught her eye. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to send a chill down her spine. "Did anyone else see that?" she asked, her voice low. "I saw it too," Jace replied, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. "Something's out there." The crew halted, their senses heightened as they scanned the area. The flicker of movement was gone, but the feeling of being watched lingered. "Stay alert," Rhea commanded. "We don't know what's out here." They continued their trek toward the city, the tension in the air growing with every step. The ruins of the Alvin's once great civilization loomed before them, a testament to a past that had been lost to time. But Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Someone, was watching them. As they neared the city's entrance, a low growl echoed from the darkness. The sound sent a wave of fear through the group, but Rhea stood firm, her voice steady. "Prepare yourselves. We're not leaving until we find out what happened to the Ulvins." The team drew their weapons, ready for whatever danger lay ahead. The journey into the unknown had only just begun. The city loomed ahead, its ancient stone structures casting long shadows as the crew approached. The atmosphere felt heavy, thick with the memories of a civilization that once thrived. Yet, the silence around them was unnerving. Even the distant sounds of nature had fallen quiet, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Rhea took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the mission pressing on her shoulders. She had to find the Ulvins, discover what had happened to their once great society, and bring hope to a people who had been lost for so long. It was more than just a mission now. It was a chance to save an entire race from extinction. "Captain, look over here," Eric called from a nearby alleyway. His voice was tinged with excitement, but also caution. Rhea quickly made her way over to him, her crew following close behind. Eric was crouched beside a set of large, intricate stone doors. The carvings on the surface were unfamiliar but beautiful, full of swirling patterns and strange symbols. "I think we found something," Eric said, glancing up at Rhea. "These doors, they look like they lead to something important." Rhea nodded, her eyes scanning the intricate designs. "Let's open them. We need to see what's inside." The crew gathered around the doors, trying to push them open, but they were heavy and resistant. After several attempts, Jace pulled out a device from his pack. "I've got an idea. Let me try this." With a few quick adjustments, the device hummed to life. A soft blue light pulsed from its core, and the stone doors began to slowly move, grinding against the earth. The crew stepped back, watching in awe as the doors finally opened wide enough for them to enter. Inside was a massive chamber, dimly lit by the soft glow of ancient crystals embedded in the walls. The space was vast, with towering columns stretching up to a ceiling that seemed to vanish into the darkness. At the center of the room, a large altar-like structure stood. On it was an orb, pulsing with a strange, almost mesmerizing light. "This must be it," Rhea whispered, her voice full of awe. "This is the heart of their civilization." The crew carefully stepped forward, their eyes fixed on the orb. As they drew closer, the air around them seemed to vibrate, as if the orb was alive with energy. It was beautiful, but there was also a sense of foreboding. Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that this was both the key to understanding the Alvin's downfall and their potential salvation. "This is where they kept their knowledge," Jace said, his voice low. "This orb, it's a record of their history." Rhea nodded, turning to her crew. "We need to activate it. This could be the only way to understand what happened to them." Eric stepped forward, cautiously reaching out to touch the orb. As his fingers brushed against its smooth surface, a flash of light filled the room. The orb seemed to come alive, and images began to swirl in the air around them. The crew watched in awe as a holographic projection appeared, showing the Ulvins in their prime. Tall, graceful beings with bright, shimmering skin. They were a peaceful people, their cities full of life, their technology advanced beyond anything humanity had ever seen. But as the images continued, the tone shifted. The holographs change, showing the Ulvans in the midst of a great war. Their once beautiful cities were now burning, their people scattered and broken. A dark force, unknown and powerful, had attacked them, wiping out nearly every trace of their civilization. This, Rhea whispered, her heart sinking. This is why they're gone. The hologram shifted once more, showing a small group of Ulvans retreating into the deep reaches of the planet. They were the last survivors, carrying with them the hope that one day they would rebuild. But the images faded quickly, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the orb. Rhea's mind raced. The Ulvans hadn't been wiped out completely. They had escaped, hidden away. But for how long? And what had happened to them since? We have to find them, Rhea said, her voice filled with determination. They're still alive. They have to be. Eric stepped forward, his face filled with concern. But how do we find them, Captain? The planet is vast, and the Ulvans could be anywhere. Rhea's eyes locked onto the orb, still pulsing with energy. This orb contains all their knowledge. There must be a way to track them down. The crew worked together, trying to extract more information from the orb. As the hours passed, they learned of hidden bunkers, secret locations deep within the planet where the last of the Ulvans had taken refuge. But they were scattered, and the journey to reach them would be treacherous. Rhea looked at her crew, each member exhausted but determined. We're going to find them, she said, her voice steady. We'll bring them back, and we'll make sure they never have to hide again. The crew nodded, a renewed sense of purpose lighting their eyes. They had found hope, not just for the Ulvans, but for themselves as well. They had the knowledge, the will, and the strength to continue. And no matter what dangers lay ahead, they would not stop until they had fulfilled their mission. With the orb's guidance, Rhea and her crew set out once again, ready to face the unknown and bring the forgotten alien race back from the shadows.